Chapter 16. Charlie. The chilly air bites through my jacket as I make my way to the kayak launch. I'm not exactly sure why this guy chose kayaking, as it's usually more of a summer activity. But at least it's not a sushi restaurant. It is something adventurous, and how bad could it really be? An hour out on the pristine Sound? It actually sounds like a breath of fresh air. But just in case, I've decided to play a little game with myself as the date progresses. I'll give Garrett mental points for things he does well, and I'll subtract them for anything that annoys me. If he ends up with a positive score, and the date isn't a disaster, then I'll think about a second date. As I near the rental hut, I see a man with long dark hair and a full beard, leaning against the side. He's handsome, so I'll give him 2 points for that, but a full beard isn't really my thing, so I remove one of those points. "You must be Charlie," he says when I reach him. "I am, and you must be Garrett," I say, sticking my hand out to shake his. "In the flesh." He shakes my hand firmly, so I add a point. But then he smiles and flicks his hair over his shoulder as if he's modeling for a camera or something. I subtract 2 points. The last thing I need is to date someone who's a diva. I get enough of that with Belle. Although he is a semi-professional model, so perhaps it's just a hazard of the job. I add 1 point back. "Are you ready to get out there on the water?" I am, although I hope we don't fall in. It's a little chillier out there than when I normally go kayaking. "Yeah, but that's the fun of it. There is no one else out on the open water, so we have the whole place to ourselves. Besides, I am a master kayaker. I don't fall in the water." Okay, he's a little full of himself, but he does appear to be in good shape, and he might kayak a lot. So I decide the points cancel each other out, and I let it go. After all, I'd rather be out here with someone who knows what they're doing than with a clumsy beginner. "What are we waiting for, then?" He flashes me another smile. He really does have a nice one, and then hands me a life jacket. "This should fit you, but let me know if you need me to adjust the straps." He wiggles his bushy eyebrows suggestively, and I subtract another point. So far, he's striking out, or maybe getting walks, but he's definitely not hitting anything out of the park. "I think I can handle it," I say, but the jacket fits fine, and I don't need to do any adjustments. He dons his own life jacket, grabs 2 oars, and then leads the way to the launch where a kayak bobs in the water. "Ladies first," he says, gesturing to the back of the kayak and handing me one of the oars. I can't decide whether this is a point in his favor for being chivalrous or a point deducted for putting me in the back. Balancing the oar against the side, I climb in the back and get situated, careful to keep my movements slow so as not to tip the kayak. When I'm as comfortable as I can be, I give him a nod and he climbs in the front. His weight sends the kayak tilting, but thankfully he shifts before the force carries it over and we end up in the water. "Off we go," he hollers, and pushes us away from the dock. It takes us a few minutes, but finally we get our paddles in sync and begin gliding through the water. Though cold, it really is beautiful, and I find myself relaxing and enjoying the date, even though we aren't talking much. "Look, a family of ducks," he says, pointing off to the left. "Let's see how close we can get to them." "I don't think that's a good idea," I say. "The ducks will probably fly away before we reach them, but if they don't, then they could end up attacking us." "It's fine. I do it all the time." He sticks his oar in the water and begins taking giant strokes. I sigh and paddle along, more out of obligation than enthusiasm. The ducks, of course, notice us almost immediately and start moving away. Garrett doesn't seem to get the hint, though, and doubles down, his strokes splashing water onto both of us. Now I'm cold and wet. I subtract another point. Garrett, I don't think— Shh, just trust me, he interrupts, grinning over his shoulder like he's on a safari. We'll get close enough for a picture. It'll be great. I tighten my grip on my oar. Trust him? I don't even know him. But I do know that chasing wildlife never goes well. Plus, I don't have a camera. I don't even have my phone. I left it in the car just in case we got wet. I'm pretty sure the ducks don't want to be Instagram stars, I mutter under my breath. But he doesn't hear me, or if he does, he chooses to ignore me. We get a little closer, and Garrett stops paddling. He reaches into his pocket for what I assume is his camera for the picture. But before he can take it, the ducks take off in a flurry of wings and water, startling Garrett so much that he jerks the kayak to one side. I try to counteract his movement, but Newton's law of motion takes over and the kayak capsizes, sending us both tumbling into the freezing water. I come up sputtering, my hair plastered to my face, my clothing soaked through. The cold is eating through my layers like a knife through butter, and I can feel my teeth begin to chatter. Garrett surfaces a moment later, shaking his head like a wet dog and sending sprays of water all around him. "Whoa, this water is colder than I expected," he exclaims, laughing. I glare at him, shivering. You don't say. I thought you said you were a master kayaker who never ended up in the water. He rubs the back of his neck sheepishly. Okay, maybe I got a little carried away. That's an understatement, I snap, subtracting 5 points. Now what? Garrett flips the kayak upright, still chuckling. We just get back in. No big deal. No big deal, I repeat, incredulous. We're soaked. It's freezing. Adventure, right? He says with a grin, his teeth chattering slightly. It's definitely not my idea of adventure, but neither is swimming or freezing in the cold sound. So I swim over to the kayak and help Garrett right it. I've never tipped a kayak, so how do we do this? I'm not sure. Why don't you try and hold it steady, and I'll climb in and then help you in. Though I'm not sure I entirely trust this plan, I hold the kayak steady and he tries to heft himself into it. But either his upper body strength is not what he thought it was, or the cold water is zapping his energy and he can't lift himself over. I'm strong, but I don't think I'm strong enough to drag him up into a kayak that I'll also have to balance. I'm about to fire off a sarcastic remark when I notice his lips turning an alarming shade of blue. Great. My date might be an idiot, but hypothermia isn't exactly how I want this date to end. I let out a long breath and decide to take charge while I'm still thinking clearly. Okay, that's not going to work. Look, we're pretty close to the shore there, which means it will probably be more shallow. Let's swim over there and then we can get back in easier. He nods and we each take a strap of the kayak and swim toward the shore. It's slow, as we're only able to use one hand each, but I'm hoping the energy we're using will also keep us warm. Finally, I feel ground beneath my feet. We push the kayak a little further until it's at our knee level, and then I hold it while he climbs in the front. He's shaking so badly that it takes longer than it should, but finally he's in. Put your oar against the ground to help steady the kayak for me, I say, and Garrett puts his oar in the water. I press mine into the ground as well and press it against the kayak to give me leverage. My muscles are freezing, and getting them to work is like trying to walk through sludge. But I finally make it in the back of the kayak. It's not pretty, and about as graceful as a drenched cat escaping a bathtub, but thankfully no one is around to see it. Okay, let's get back to shore while we can still paddle, I say, as my teeth begin to chatter. My fingers are numb, but I make myself focus on my hands. Hold the oar. Stroke. Stroke. I glance up at Garrett. He's still paddling, but his strokes are slow. It feels like it takes forever, but finally we reach the launch. As we navigate in, Garrett turns to me and grins. You got to admit, this'll be a date to remember. Oh, don't worry, I reply, shivering. It's burned into my memory forever. I place my oar across the launch to steady the kayak, but even with that help, Garrett can barely make it out. He flops onto the launch like a fish out of water, and I follow suit, colder, wetter, and angrier than I've ever been on a date. Thanks for being a good sport, he says, as we struggle to pull the kayak onto the dock. I stare at him, my teeth chattering too much to form a response. This is the kind of story you tell your friends when they ask why you're single. Drinks to warm up, he suggests. No thanks, I say finally, wrapping my arms around myself for warmth. I think I've had enough adventure for one day. Let's just get the kayak back to the rental shack while we still can. He shrugs, still smiling. Suit yourself. I'll call you, though. I don't bother correcting him as we lug the kayak toward the shack. Thankfully, it's not too far, and the rental guy takes pity on us when he sees us approaching dripping wet. He grabs the kayak. You guys took a spill, huh? Just spicing up the adventure, Garrett says. I shake my head and head to my car where I turn the heat on full blast until I stop shivering. I may have to find an even tougher workout to put Penelope through after this.